Hey everyone, welcome to Rushing the Field, a weekly national college football podcast from NBC Sports. He's Joshua Perry. I'm Nicole Auerbach. We're so glad you're here. If you like our show, please subscribe, rate, and review us. Hang out with us on YouTube. Hang out with us wherever you get your podcasts. JP, we've had actual football. Real things happened. Fan bases are melting down. This is what we live for. This is the best.
It is the best. The fan base is melting down is absolutely crazy. It's too early for that, and I understand why some of them are, because if I was part of your fan base, I'd be melting down too. But super excited. Week 1 was amazing, and we got a couple good games here for week 2 that I'm really looking forward to.
We did, and because of the theme of our show is rushing the field. Like, we are going to celebrate upsets, so we'll start by just shouting out Boston College, Vanderbilt, some of the big upsets from week 1. Congrats to those teams. We are going to get to some of those games. We're going to do stock up, stock down, so we can talk about some of those fan bases that are completely melting down and still melting down. I actually just added LSU to our rundown because we need to go there as well after their loss to USC. We'll get into all of that in just a second. We always start the show with the ticket stub. This is your point of entry into the podcast. Kind of a light week news-wise. So we'll start with Florida State dropping out of the AP Top 25 poll after an 0-2 start. They were number 10, and because of the fluke, because they played week 0, it was very strange that BC can count that as a top 10 win because they were still in there. This is the last time that a team ranked in the AP preseason top 10 dropped out of the top 25 entirely by the second poll. That was Clemson in 2008. This was just a weird quirk, like a weird way that this went about, but the FSU meltdown is on a different level because we've had 2 games and 0 proof of concept of anything that they're trying to do well.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's talking about DJU and how poor he's looked, and I think that was a pretty predictable thing. And it's not to say that DJU looked bad last year. He certainly looked like a manageable quarterback out there at Oregon State. We had seen some really low lights at Clemson, but the idea that he looks terrible is not a shock. What is a shock is the trenches on both sides, because we've heard about this offensive line and Alex Atkins, the OC offensive line coach, who is a guy who people thought was kind of a rising star. They don't look great. The defensive line, it had been reported by people that they could have the best defensive line in college football. I've seen high school defensive lines that look more competent than what Florida State's got at this point. So that's the real thing that's shocking to me is the lack of strength in the trenches.
Yeah, I think that was what was most glaring. I think it's easy to say, okay, DJ was totally inaccurate. He was missing his receivers. They were bad too. There were some drops. No one was really helping him out. They barely tried to run the ball against Boston College. But you're right. I mean, they're just getting bullied, first by Georgia Tech and now by BC. These are not the powerhouses in the ACC. This is a first-year head coach in Bill O'Brien, and you're getting beat up that way, and they're controlling the game. That first quarter was, I feel like, a really good representation of all of this. BC had the ball over 14 minutes of a 15-minute first quarter. Florida State's in trouble. It's just hard to look at that schedule and say, hey, where are the wins when they're playing like this? And obviously they didn't make a quarterback change. They didn't really change anything up. So we will see. But that was definitely the big headline out of the new AP poll. The rest looks about right. You've got Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, Oregon, Penn State, Missouri, and Michigan. So Michigan fell a little bit because that was kind of an unimpressive season opener for them. But I mean, the rest of this feels right. I mean, Texas looked great. They're rightfully in the top 3. Notre Dame up to number 5, big win at Kyle Field, and Penn State at number 8. And I'm high on Missouri. So this all feels pretty right to me. Georgia and Ohio State, we've talked a lot about in our preseason show about just how much we buy into them and how well they're playing. But what this does do is it does set up, we've got a top 10 showdown in Ann Arbor, number 3 Texas, number 10 Michigan. And we'll get to Notre Dame a little bit later, but they picked up the best win in the country so far. So, it's a really, I think, an accurate glimpse of where we are in college football now that Florida State has finally fallen out of the top 10.
Yeah, I'm totally there with you. You could have had the conversation, and this is almost how do you really feel about it? Could have had the conversation. Do you actually jump Texas over Ohio State? Because I do think that they look, just better as a whole off of eye test, which is what we're going off for those two teams.
Right.
But Texas will have their opportunity if they can get a win against Michigan on the road. They'll they will certainly jump Ohio State. The Notre Dame thing is interesting to me. And I believe Texas A&M dropped out of the AP top 25. But I think LSU might still be in there, which is a weird thing. And because you're basically saying we thought USC had a win over a pretty good team. Maybe they're saying that they don't know if Texas A&M is as good as they think they are, but Notre Dame's getting the credit for that one. And those are kind of the quirks that I hate when I look at these rankings, which I probably should stop looking at, if I'm being completely honest. And then the most glaring one is Oregon, as much as they struggled, and now our perception of them early on. And they're going to have a solid test for a non-con this week. So maybe they make a little bit of a move there, but those are things that stood out to me.
Yeah, we'll get into that. That's one of the games that we will spotlight and dive a little bit deeper into a little bit later in the show. A couple of other news items. Northwestern introduced their new athletic director, Mark Jackson. He came over after a long run at Villanova, where he oversaw 2 national championships. He was talking about basically the 2 themes of his introductory press conference were about doing the right thing. You're still kind of coming out of a hazing scandal at Northwestern. So he talked about, doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always right. We're going to commit to that. So this is education around all different areas. He said gambling, consent, academic integrity, everything on campus. He's going to be focused on that. And the other thing that I think is more, important moving forward is, hey, what is Northwestern going to do? How are they going to fit into kind of the new era of college sports? Revenue sharing, what are they going to spend on that? Are they going to try to, have athletics at the highest level of college sports moving forward? So obviously it's day one. We don't have those answers for him, but he's going to be the one overseeing that. He was at USC during the Pete Carroll days. Again, he's been at Villanova as basketball took over the sport. So he has a very interesting background that I think positions him really well for this, but that is an interesting and a unique place. We both live in Chicago. We're near it.
Yep.
It operates, and the alums and the students, everything is different there. It's not Ohio State. So that's, I think, the big challenge moving forward is, hey, what does Northwestern want to be?
It's a wonderful question, because I think when you're the athletic director at Northwestern, more so than maybe other schools, you're involved in academic conversations that ADs aren't typically involved in. I think that's kind of what you're getting at. First off, the idea of doing the right thing and doing things the right way, I think, was an important tone to strike based off of what we've covered from Northwestern over the last couple of years. So I certainly love that. But when you're talking about how is Northwestern going to fit into the landscape, I don't even think it's the financial aspect, because they've always been able to come up with money. Will they allow transfers in a way that more competitive schools do? Because there are probably academic overlays that are really difficult to overcome. Will they make more exceptions for maybe premium recruits that are interested in going to Northwestern in situations where they said you can't get in, right? That's the thing that I think about. And there's a balance to it, because you have a lot of people to answer to. Some of the alums probably hate the idea of maybe, moving the bar a little bit, but if you want to be competitive, you might have to start getting with it.
Yeah, it's kind of an underrated part, right? We stopped talking about it with Colorado, but that is what enabled them to do what they're doing with Deion Sanders, because they had a lot of restrictions, couldn't get transfers in.
Yeah.
And they had to loosen that when they hired Deion to allow them to flip a roster. So absolutely a key thing moving forward. Last note, just something to track in the weeks and months ahead. Later today's Thursday, the federal judge, Claudia Wilkin, she's hearing objections to the NCAA house settlement. So basically, we're not going to get a final answer from her, but she has to give approval to the proposed settlement at some point. So today we're going to get a sense of, hey, where does she feel about it? How does she ask questions? What does she react to from the objections? Because basically the objections are saying You've had them from different athletes, former athletes. You've had people, object about what this might do for female sports, capping the compensation, restricting future athletes too much over 10 years. But basically just a lot of different like holes that people are poking at for the settlement that would create a revenue share model moving forward. Schools could pay up to, it's like 20 to 23 million per year to start. So basically, this is a glimpse into how the judge feels about it, and then she will make a final determination. A lot of people are operating like it's going to happen or it's going to be, similar to the framework that's proposed now. But this is an important step, obviously. Like she has to approve it, and then, people can actually start making their plans. But we'll get a better sense of where she stands, and we'll hear, Title IX issues will probably come up. Issues about compensating, like saying, hey, this is the cap for each year, putting a cap on it in general. So all of that will come up, and we'll see the fallout of all of that from Judge Wilkin.
Yeah, it's going to be intriguing. And one of the things, regardless of what they actually get the approval or not eventually, is some of these objections I do think are legitimate, and they're still going to have to be reconciled with on campuses. Like the Title IX thing, I've heard of like a million different approaches to how it actually applies. Like the legal minds have given different interpretations of how that should actually apply, which is intriguing. I have asked a question about women's sports and non-revenue sports and how this all fits into the big picture. And regardless of what happens here, those objections are still going to remain on college campuses, and the ADs are going to have answers for them.
100%. And there will be lawsuits about that will eventually determine how Title IX applies. But people are just guessing right now, and they're guessing different ways that it applies. So we'll continue to follow all of that because I've covered college sports business and the NCAA stuff and all of that. So we will continue to do it. I'm going to make Joshua cover it as well. But it's time to get into the actual football. Now that we've had actual games, we're going to bring in our stock up, stock down segment and talk about teams or players. This week, they're all teams that are rising. Let's start with Miami. I feel like that was what?
No, I mean, like, let's start with Miami is amazing because I feel like we've waited so long to really engage in this conversation about their ability to like actually win. And I know it's one game and we do the overreaction thing. Miami looks like they might be able to actually win.
I know. Well, you're right. So like they're our number one team of like, hey, they had a good week. It's been a while since we can put Miami in that group. We said this last week, right? Like the loser of the Miami-Florida game was going to be in a complete meltdown mode.
Yep.
Accurate. But the winner, like it was Miami, the way that Cam Ward played, like sky is the limit, especially with the way the rest of the ACC looks. Like Miami is absolutely the favorite now. But like Cam Ward was such a huge pickup. We talked about like all the different like what ifs, right? Sliding doors of, what if he had gone to Florida State? What if he had stayed in the draft? Like this worked out brilliantly because we saw him at his best in his debut.
Yeah, and he looks super comfortable out there, which is amazing. He's a difference maker for that program. And I think that with his playmaking ability, both within structure and outside of structure, they're going to be fantastic. Restrepo was phenomenal too at wide receiver, and he had some big plays a year ago. But again, that connection is going to be big for them. And this idea now of Miami not just being like, a really talented on paper team and like seeing they can actually execute and they can make the explosive play and they just have to put it together for a season is really exciting because the last 2 years we could have looked at Miami and had similar expectations because of the talent, but there was nothing there to make us believe they can do it. Now we have a reason to believe.
Absolutely. The bandwagon is filling up. People are into it. And I'm glad you brought up Restrepo. He's someone that like he's been there, but he deserves his shine. And we saw what he was capable of in this game. And I hope he continues to be a focal point of the offense. Another team that is up, Penn State. They have an offense. They have an explosive and aggressive and interesting offense under Andy Kotelnicki. Like how blown away were you by what we saw from Drew Aller after what we saw from him last year?
I thought this was a really good offensive performance for Penn State. Drew Aller's a different player right now. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that because it's like, oh, he made a couple. Like, emotionally, he's a different player. He's engaged with the game in a different way that we didn't get to see a year ago. He looked like a deer in headlights a lot of times, and it was unfortunate because you're like, if he can ever get in a groove, he's going to be all right. I loved it. I think Kotelnicki has opened up a side of this offense that we haven't seen in a while, which is like the creative formations and shifts and motions that lead to the actual explosive plays. I think that Mike Yurcich tried to do some of that, but he couldn't execute on the most important part, which was the outcome of the play being explosive. My biggest question, though, and as I said it when we were watching the game, there was a big run for Penn State. I'm still not sure that this run game is punchy enough, but if they can throw the ball down the field the way that they did, I'm not sure that it matters all too much.
Yeah, I think some of your criticism is based on the way the offense, it was painful for the offense to move the ball sometimes. Yeah. But if it looks easy, and this is an offensive coordinator that did it with multiple quarterbacks, Kansas had injury issues, but they remained, like the way you're talking about the shifts, the motion, they had all of that no matter who was under center or in the gun. Like it's going to be entertaining to continue to watch, and we'll see if it sticks. But like, I think this is the most encouraging you've got to feel as a Penn State fan in years from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, I think Penn State fans probably have that, and I hate to like use PTSD in this type of situation, but they probably have that like, well, I got to see it against Ohio State because I've been fooled before, like. And I think that's a really tough spot to be in because it makes it hard to enjoy the journey up to that game.
Yeah. And maybe it shifts a little bit with the 12-team playoff because, those playing Ohio State, like that may not be the barrier to getting you to the postseason, right? So, I mean, I feel really good. I think the people who put Penn State in their brackets, like, got to feel really good about what we saw in that debut. Last team for stock up, Notre Dame. We've talked about this a little bit. We saw them in the poll. This was a huge win against Texas A&M in incredibly hostile environment. I think by far the most challenging game on their schedule, although USC looks improved defensively. They've got a quarterback. They've got all of that at the end of the year. But like the defense was phenomenal, which we thought going in. And like Marcus Freeman had told me, like, no issues, no questions on the defense. Like that was like our conversation about that side of the ball. That was accurate. We saw that. And then I think you saw a toughness from a young offensive line, the new transfer quarterback, like to gut it out at the end.
I'm there with you. I thought the defense looked as good as any defense I had seen in an opening game from a fundamental and physicality standpoint. Like I flipped on the coach's tape earlier this week, and everybody's playing square. They're playing with good bend, and they get to the ball or they get to whoever's trying to block them with really bad intentions. And I was like, I don't know. I felt a way emotionally watching that, like love, honestly, because I don't think people play defensive football very well nowadays. So that was great. Their offense is still a bit of a question to me. The question that I have, Jeremiah Love's phenomenal, so I don't have a singular question about that. As Mike Robb likes to say, the offense feels too small. They still don't feel like a downfield threat yet. I think they need to get there. I love Riley Leonard. I love his toughness. I like the way he plays the game. I don't know if he should get himself beat up like that because he took some shots in this game and he's been hurt in the past. Those are the questions they have to ask in terms of like their success this year, because you get to the end, Riley Leonard's not there. It might be a little bit tough. You get to the end, your offense still isn't big. They can't stretch the field. Might be tough. But like, if those are the questions you're trying to answer, I think they'll be all right.
Yeah. And that is like their main focus. You know, when I was talking to the coaches, when I was in South Bend a couple weeks ago, they do want him to go through progressions and not immediately run. And they know that that's part of who he is. And you're absolutely right about gets you banged up, gets you injured, but also like that doesn't stretch the field. That doesn't create and open up the other things that they want offensively. So that is something to keep an eye on. I think we will see more out of Riley Leonard as a passer, you know, kind of staying in that pocket, trying to go through his progressions and figure out more the vertical passing game, or at least getting different people involved to stretch the field a bit. So we'll see. Their schedule obviously lightens up a bit here now that they're through week one. I think they have an absolutely clear path to the college football playoff, which is wild to say in week one. Florida State does not look all that formidable on their schedule the rest of the way. And it's basically just USC. And like, this is a team, and maybe the schedule will be an issue, but you can lose a game and still make it to the college football playoff in a 12-team era. So
I think they can lose a game 100% and still make it. If they lose two, we're having a different conference.
Yeah, agree, without the conference championship. And that's where they are. But again, with this schedule, I'd be surprised. Like, I think like they have the clearest, anyone, I guess, Georgia, went out.
No, they've got a clear path. When you look at Georgia, the one thing you say is they still got to play in the SEC, right?
Right. But
Notre
they'll get
Dame,
mulligans. They'll be
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Stock down, meltdowns abound everywhere. Fan bases just completely self-destructing. Let's start with Clemson.
Let's start with them.
So Clemson gets blown out by Georgia. Actually hangs for a half and then gets blown out in this game. Yes. We thought that Georgia was probably significantly better than Clemson.
Yeah.
Wanted to see, hey, does this offense look any different, any more, prolific? It didn't. Looks the same. Clemson, again, we're having a conversation about, hey, why don't they use the portal? I don't think a couple portal plays would have changed the outcome of this game, but it's this whole idea that everyone else is using this piece, this valuable piece, when they're constructing rosters, when they're addressing needs, when they need to fix something, when they need to boost something. And Dabo doesn't do it. So I think this is part of the larger conversation of, hey, has current college football passed Dabo and Clemson by, in the sense of yes, you can win 9-10 games, but you're no longer in that upper echelon.
So the portal thing is interesting because I do agree with you on the standpoint of I don't think a couple of portal players get some a win in this game either. I do think a couple of players out of the portal get some closer, right? And the litmus test here essentially was, how far away are you from being a championship program? And it's pretty damn far at this point based off of that second half. But the other thing is, and this is what bothers me about Dabo so much, is they're like, Dabo, why don't you use the portal? And he says, well, I don't think there's one player in there that's better than any of the players that we have. It's just not true. Objectively, that is false. And to me, I think it's malpractice if you're not in the least bit interested, because you aren't giving your team the best chance to win football games when you don't try to get the best players. You do it in high school recruiting. Why won't you do it in the portal? That's my biggest question. And so this is what you get. And they're far away from being the program that we used to watch, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And it's unfortunate for Dabo because I think he's starting to wear people out. A part of the university, people like us, people are getting worn out.
Yeah. And by the way, if you truly think that there's no one in the portal that can help your team, your evaluation and your development is not where it was either. And you need to see that on your own roster. You need to see your own deficiencies. Anyway, so there's a lot there, but they are clearly not in that select group of national championship contenders this year. And it hasn't been the last couple of years. But until they address these things, until they fix things, or maybe they never do, I don't think they're in that group. Here's another group that is very far from championship contention: Florida.
Poor Florida.
That was a brutal debut. And then, of course, it's the in-state loss, and now Miami is good, and people believe in Miami. And you are just in a position where your fan base is Googling what Billy Napier's buyout is.
Oh, that's a worse spot to be in early in the year. And I guess at least they've got Florida State fans to be miserable alongside. And just the Miami people are the ones that are having some fun right now. But it wasn't the idea that we didn't think that Florida fans would feel like this. It is the fact that they feel like this early. And now Graham Mertz is also a little bit busted up. And it doesn't feel like things are going to line up for them at all.
Yeah, and that is a tidbit of news worth watching in the game against Samford, because DJ Lagway, the freshman quarterback, will make his first career start because Graham Mertz is still in concussion protocol. So we'll see. I mean, I think that's kind of your last the last ace up your sleeve is, hey, here's this freshman quarterback that everyone wants to see. Let's see if it changes something. But we will continue to monitor the meltdowns in the state of Florida. How about LSU, though? So they lose a very close game to USC. Both of these teams came in needing to prove that they can actually play defense and that their quarterbacks, who were homegrown, didn't go and get a flashy guy out of the portal. These guys who bided their time, waited for this opportunity. I thought both quarterbacks were actually quite good. But LSU ends up on the wrong side, and Brian Kelly is furious in the postgame. He is like, he's pounding the table. That water bottle is flying all over the place. And it feels like LSU fans are now questioning, hey, is this the guy? Can he not win us a national championship? Previous coaches can win national championships here. Is Brian Kelly doing anything to show that he can do that at LSU?
Man, first off, the pounding the table thing felt very scripted, very intentional, if you will. So BK, maybe let's make that look like it just happened in the moment the next time. The interesting thing is LSU ain't out of anything right now. Like, I get it's frustrating, and it's really the trend of starting off the year like this under BK, because they've done it the past couple years as well. They're not out of anything, and he's gotten a couple big victories. Like, I think people should be disappointed. Take a deep breath as well, right? Like, Brian Kelly is in that tough spot, a little bit like James Franklin. Good coaches, like, they win games, but at some point people get pissed off by just being good. Like, they want to be great. And he's in this, like, has never really been great. He had the national championship appearance at Notre Dame. But like, that's what he's dealing with. And I think that is a really hard narrative to start to beat, is you can't win the big one, you can't get us a championship type deal. I just think people need to take a deep breath right now after week one if you're an LSU fan.
Yeah, but I do think it's because they've done it the last 3 years.
Oh, for sure. The trend is off.
Ogeron, right? It's like, I think 5 straight openers. They've started 0-1. So yeah, it's an interesting time to be there, because you're absolutely right. You're in a conference. You're going to have so many opportunities to win big games. So to be hitting the panic button a little bit, interesting choice by Brian Kelly. All right, as we continue to look back before we look forward to week 2, wanted to go through our power rankings this week presented by Citibank. These are our best, well, my best. Joshua is probably going to argue with them.
Yes.
Power rank the best 2024 debuts. So week 1 rankings, I put Cam Ward up there as number 1, 385 yards, 3 touchdowns in the win against Florida. We've got Bill O'Brien, 28-13 win over FSU in Tallahassee. Maybe the best BC win since maybe the Matt Ryan era. I don't know. I got to think about that one. Andy Kotelnicki, we talked about it. Penn State has a great and interesting offense, at least through one game. Nearly 500 yards of offense. They were averaging 7.6 yards per play. It was really balanced. If you look at the stats and the box score, really balanced between a productive pass game and a rushing attack. Dylan Raiola, the Nebraska true freshman quarterback, 5-star recruit, he's up there. He looked really, really good in their opener. 19 of 27 for 238 yards, 2 touchdowns, no turnovers in the 40-7 win over UTEP. He only played a little bit in the third quarter, and they were able to take him out. It's been a while since Nebraska, I think, has felt that good about their offense and about the quarterback position. And number 5, Ohio State freshman receiver Jeremiah Smith, 6 catches for 92 yards, 2 touchdowns. We know that coaching staff is so high on him, and we saw it. I mean, you absolutely saw why in this game, and he probably could have done even a little bit more, but this is just the starting point for him. I mean, he's clearly Ohio State's next great receiver, and the future is now with him. So, all right, tear it up, JP. I'm sure you disagree with my rankings.
There's a little bit of a disagreement. Listen, I like everybody that's actually in here. I think these were the top 5, debut performances of the weekend. I'm actually keeping Jeremiah Smith there at 5. I don't want to overreact because it was Akron and we've seen great Ohio State wide receivers. This is where I am going to overreact, though. This man might be a first-round pick this year if he was draft eligible. That's how good I think his year is going to be. And just from seeing a little bit of the training camp competition and battles that he had, he is supremely talented, and it's going to be a fun year to watch, but I'll keep him at 5. I'm going to flip Kotelnicki and Raiola. And the only reason why is I think being a freshman quarterback is extremely difficult, even against UTEP. And Dylan Raiola had that 2-minute drive at the end of the first half that I thought was extremely impressive from an operations standpoint, from a comfort standpoint for a player that young. Kotelnicki has been really good in the past, and he's called a ton of college games, and so I think he gets a lot of credit. But like, this was Dylan's debut, and Kotelnicki has done this before, so it's the only reason I'm flipping them. I think they were both fantastic in what their teams need, though. I'm probably going to leave 1 and 2 where they're at. And Bill O'Brien, congratulations, dude. Like, absolutely just smothered Florida State. It was physical. There were moments where it just felt like you were grinding them to a pulp. And I think that's exactly what he wants it to feel like at times. It was really good. But Cam Ward was ridiculous. And we're going to watch the highlights all year long as they put together his Heisman highlight reel. Right, like there will be plays from this game on that, and that's that on that.
All right, so those are power rankings this week. We'll do a different topic each week. So if you got any ideas, tweet them to us. We're probably gonna do. I know we want to do helmets. I know we want to do like maybe stadium food. We'll do a lot of different fun topics. I think, yeah, Joshua, you and your food takes. So we'll have to get into some of those because I'm sure whatever the blandest possible concession item would be, your choice.
I mean, I like the classics. Bland is very disrespectful.
Bland is accurate.
The classics.
All right, let's turn the page. Let's talk about week 2. Getting closer and closer to kickoff. A couple really big and significant games. A couple games that we'll learn a ton about both teams. So each week we're going to go through 3. We'll start with the big game, Texas, Michigan. This is a top 10 showdown in Ann Arbor. Texas is favored by 7.5 points. They don't meet often. This was a non-conference game that was scheduled a while back. Conference realignment allowed us to keep it. They relocated the game. It's in Ann Arbor. This is going to be the noon game on Fox. And this is going to be a huge, huge test for Michigan's offense, which really struggled in their opener against Fresno State. And Fresno State's good. But should they really be pushing you around, your new offensive line around that way? You know, should it look that difficult to run the ball? And you also have a quarterback in Davis Warren who is brand new. He made his first career start last week. That was a bit of a surprise because I think all offseason people assumed that it was going to be Alex Orji. We did see Orji in the game. He threw the first touchdown pass of the game as well. But I think, you're expecting Davis Warren and what we saw from the offense that really needs to take a step forward against a Texas offense and Texas defense that just played in the college football playoff as well, kept more people. Quinn Ewers looked fantastic in his season opener the other day. They're down a couple running backs, so that's one area of concern, I think, for Texas. But like, these are 2 teams coming into this game, I think, in totally different directions. Like, I think Michigan has a lot of questions, and Texas has answered a lot of their questions.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's really hard for me to figure out like how much, and this is where I guess we'll learn it. But like, the Michigan defense, I think, is going to be phenomenal this year. So how much can they keep them in a game like this where Texas is going to have a very high-powered offense that is probably going to be able to get their plays and move the ball at times, right? And then Texas defensively, I don't know how much better they got from a year ago. Their secondary really struggled a year ago, but this ain't the game where their secondary is going to be tested. Like that it plays into their hand defensively to kind of avoid the thing that would hurt them the most because of what we saw to Michigan's offense last week. I think there are a couple of things that need to happen for Michigan. Is number one, they need to challenge down the football field. The first time they threw it down the field with Davis Warren, it was an interception. At that point, it was kind of dinking and dunking. I think they were trying to get a rhythm there. I think they need to stretch the field because their offensive line clearly is not what it was a year ago. And they don't have Blake Corum in that running back room like they did over the last handful of years. It's harder for them to run the ball the way that they did before. And the point that I'm trying to make is I think they need to force defenses to play in schemes where they keep the safeties out of the box. Because if I'm scheming against Michigan right now, I don't feel a need to have my safety super deep, and I'm going to try to stuff the run, especially if Orgy's in the game. I think that's going to be a key for them. It's just a matter of when that comes along. 7.5 is a really interesting number because I think a lot of people from what they saw a week ago have these teams almost like worlds apart. But it's that idea that Michigan's defense is good enough and that Texas has to play in the big house that it's not likely that it gets blown out.
Right. And I think like that is something that we've said and wondered about this team. Like, can the defense carry them through the first part of the season and allow the offense and all the newness to figure itself out? For the O-line that, had replaced its entire starting offensive line, can they buy them time? Can they fix this? And can they help, the quarterback that's going to be stepping in? Because either way, you're going to be talking about first career starts, and start number 2 is going to be against Texas. So we'll see. I think that is going to be a really interesting test for the defense and just how much they can do for Michigan. But really, I think everyone would like to see some steps forward offensively. Yeah. And we'll see. But yeah, Texas favored, absolutely the correct call. I think they'll win the game. Again, I don't think that eliminates Michigan from playoff contention if they can get better through the course of the year. But I mean, this feels like it's for Texas. They're catching Michigan at a really good time, and can get a nice little feather in their cap.
Yeah, I think Texas wins this one too. I think that they probably win by 10-ish.
Yeah, I think they cover as well.
Yeah. But the interesting note real quick, because I love to put these things out in the universe, 29 straight regular season wins for Michigan, best streak in Big Ten history, 23 straight games at the Big House they've won. It's a lot of history.
You're trying to do like an announcer jinx here? You're just trying to
maybe. Part of me is salty though, because Ohio State used to have the straight wins regular season. So
yeah, it's harder to do that when they're losing the game of the year.
This 3-year run for the Wolverines it was one of the teams that I was on. I think we had won like 24 straight regular season games up to that point, and that was a record. And then these guys come through the last 3 years and they've been phenomenal. So they just kicked us out the record books.
Yep, that's how record books work, JP.
I know, but it's bothersome because it's my rival.
I know.
Although, congratulations, great 3-year run.
Yep. We'll see. That streak is definitely on the line this weekend against Texas, who's favored on the road at the Big House. We'll be watching that one. Our primetime NBC game, Colorado versus Nebraska. Huskers favored by 7.5 points at home. I'm literally podcasting from Lincoln. I've been here this week. We were embedded with the program for a few days. Spent a lot of time with Dylan, Raiola, Matt Rule, the staff, everyone. Really excited for this game. And by the way, Lincoln is jazzed. Like, everyone here is so hyped. Like, there's so much excitement and anticipation of this game because you have the historic rivalry with Colorado and Nebraska. And then everyone's still really pissed off about last year and how last year ended, and no Coach Prime fans anywhere in this city right now. So it's going to be fun. This one's going to be really fun.
It could be one of the greatest environments that we see all year, really. And that's what I'm excited about. I think Nebraska is a much better team than they were a year ago. And I don't think Colorado has that same kind of that high and that buzz that they were kind of riding off of when they played last year. And I think the game plan becomes pretty simple for Nebraska. It's you got to contain Shador, certainly. Okay, Travis Hunter, you got to know where he's at when he's in the game on offense, and then Jimmy Horn Jr. And I think if you can make the game difficult for those guys, and I'm not saying that to say it's an easy task, but if you do that, it's going to be a really long day for Colorado. The other part is Nebraska should move the ball on this Colorado defense. Like, Dion versus defense has been one of the greatest rivalries in college football over the last year. So I think they just got to not turn the ball over, and they'll put points up on the board.
Yeah, and I think that's the key really for them this season is to not turn the ball over, because if they just had quarterbacks that could contain and control the offense and not turn the ball over, they would have won a lot more games. They would have been bowl eligible by now. We wouldn't be talking about this streak dating back to 2016 of the last time they were in a bowl game. So this year, and that's like, again, when I think as you look at like Raiola's debut, no turnovers, just as impressive as over 200 yards passing, which was hard for that offense to do. They didn't have any games last year where they had over 200 yards of passing yards. So there's just a lot to be excited about. And I think they understand that if they fix the things that self-inflicted mistakes, that they should be well positioned in this game. I mean, that was one of Matt Rule has said this publicly. He says it to his team a lot. Like, you're a good team. Like, he knows that they're capable of winning games this year that they maybe didn't last year, or, this program didn't 2 years ago before he got here. And so I think that message is really clear. He wants them to take the counterpunch, or take the punches and counterpunch. He wants them to, yes, they have incredible skill players, Colorado, contain as much as possible, prepare for all of their tendencies. But if they strike first, to handle it well, to stay even keeled, and to respond. And I think that message and that kind of identity is really important. He still wants this program to be defense oriented. We saw them take such huge steps last year on that side of the ball. Yep. That only continues about just they want that to be their calling card. They want that to help the true freshman quarterback that they know and think can be really special, but they want to play complementary football. And I think they're really well positioned to do that this year. And they have good pieces around Dylan. He's really even keel. Like, we obviously haven't seen him go through something difficult yet. We haven't seen him turn over the ball. We haven't seen him lose a game. But I think he's ready for all of that. Like, he's just really studious. He has a really good head on his shoulders. And everyone we talk to, they believe that he can shoulder what he needs to bring Nebraska back to relevance. But they also believe they have really good pieces around him to help him with that. So I'm excited to see this matchup. I think they're going to avenge their loss from last year, which was painful. And I think they are going to cover. I think this is going to be a coming out party for Nebraska as, hey, look at us. We're back. Matt Rule was a great hire. He's a great turnaround guy. He always takes a big jump in year 2. It's year 2 now. Look at our schedule. We're going to be bowl eligible by Halloween.
Yep. I'm with you on all those things that you said. I think they cover as well. Bowl eligible by Halloween is going to feel so weird for Nebraska fans, right? Because it's just been so long since they've been able to say that they go to a bowl. The idea of them starting off 7-0 is not out of the question.
They could definitely be 7-0 heading into Ohio State. And listen, I actually think this is the schedule, obviously, is their friend, very helpful. But I would love the idea of getting that bowl eligibility, the 6th win, out of mind so early. Like last year, it just hung over the last month of the season. Yeah, they're at 5 wins, and there is painful ways to lose, and you wish you could take them back. Matt Rule told me that he was glad that they lost those games the way that they did, because he learned so much about his team and the way they would come back that week at practice, that they would come back and fight the following week. Obviously, you want to be bowl eligible, but I thought that was really interesting because this is a program that found new and painful ways to lose over the last 5 years. Yes. So to find a positive in some of those was really interesting. He's a great coach.
Yeah, he's an impressive guy for sure.
All right, our last game I want to preview here is our Peacock game. Late night, you're going to want to stay up for it. I think the buzz for this game has only increased after what we saw last week. We saw Oregon look fine, but not great. They dinked and dunked. They had a bunch of yardage, Dylan Gabriel, but it was close. It was we were kind of hey, is Idaho on upset alert? What's happening in this game? So unimpressive week 1 win over Idaho. And then Boise State wins a pretty crazy game. And Ashton Genty, who already has a full-fledged Heisman campaign, which he should, runs for over 200 yards and 6 touchdowns. So this is the matchup. You have one team coming off a high with a Heisman contender, who Dan Lanning has said in his time at Oregon, he has not faced a running back like this.
Yep.
And Oregon coming off of a little bit of a sleepwalking win in week 1. This is a fascinating time for both of these teams to get each other.
I'm struggling with this game. What I saw from Oregon's offensive line was troubling on Saturday. When they needed to just get a couple yards at times, they couldn't get it. They were counting on running backs to just kind of step out of tackles early in the down to try to break something. Dylan Gabriel got hit a little bit. The pocket was collapsing. I think he was throwing on the move way too much. He's really good, by the way. I know we've talked about that. But I need to see a much better Oregon offensive line, or else I'm going to start asking a few more questions about this team. To your point, Ashton Jeanty, like it's going to be a really interesting game plan, because we know Dan Lanning is going to be like, this guy is not going to make a Heisman case off of us. And so I'm curious to see what they do defensively in order to stop him. Ultimately, I think 19.5 is a little bit too big based off of the way I feel about Oregon's offense right now. But I think they still win pretty easily.
I think that number is too big also. I think that it's overreacting to last week in the struggles that we saw from Oregon. But I also think that Vegas usually does know things. But I'm still going to say, I would pick Boise with the points to keep it close, especially if they are able to run the ball somewhat effectively. That's going to eat clock, shorten the game. You want to limit possessions, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll see. But I would like to see more from Oregon in the red zone for sure. I would like to see more touchdowns this week.
Yeah.
So those are our 3 game previews for week 2. Again, 2 of them are ours, so very excited about our slate. But this is a pod called Rushing the Field. We do love to celebrate upsets. This week was a little bit hard to look for anywhere. Like, we might be tempted to take like an outright winner. So we're doing underdog picks for week 2. So we're saying, like, who would we take with the points? Although I guess I did just say that I would maybe take Boise State with the points. So JP, I'll let you go first with your underdog pick, the underdog you trust the most.
I'm actually going to go with Illinois here. They're playing Kansas. They're playing at home. I believe that this is a sold-out crowd. So certainly not known for being one of the most explosive environments in college football, but I think the fans are going to be pretty into this one. I think there's this hangover publicly, perception-wise, of Kansas maybe being a better program this year because of what they did a year ago. And I'm just not sure that's going to be the case. These are the types of games where Brett Bielema has done pretty well. He's pulled off a number of upsets, but he's also kept these games pretty close in the past. So I'm going to say that Illinois is going to be able to cover 5.5.
Okay. I am riding with the Marshall Thundering Herd. They get 20.5 points against Virginia Tech, which just feels like a lot for a Hokie team that got beat by Vanderbilt in overtime a week ago, but also like wasn't in that game for the first half. Like they fought back, they clawed back into the game. But I don't trust them. This was a popular ACC dark horse pick, a popular CFP team, and I haven't seen anything that backs that up yet. So until they prove otherwise, I think Marshall can hang in this game because they got a lot they need to figure out.
That was one of the most shocking week 1 outcomes.
100%.
Oh my God. We're watching that game and we're almost like, are we sure we're watching the right game?
Yeah. And like the cool thing there is like they just basically like just uprooted New Mexico State's program, just like brought over the coach and the quarterback.
Dropped it in Nashville.
Yeah, I love it. It was great. It was great. One of the best images of the weekend actually was Clark Lee and Jerry Kill embracing on the sideline after that win. Man. I loved that so
Jerry
much.
Kill, what a guy.
Speaking of great images, we are heading into our favorite segment. So the pod is RTF. The segment is WTF on RTF. The most ridiculous and craziest thing that we saw last week. This one just like there was no competition. Okay, so Smokey, the Tennessee mascot, went all in on a Raygun impersonation. So the outfit, first of all, incredible, looks just like her during the breakdancing competition of the Olympics. And then like this routine, he must have practiced this to really nail all of the weird moves that Raygun made during the Olympics that made her go viral. But he crushed it. Shouts to Smokey.
I'm not a mascot guy, so I don't want to give too much love here. But this was actually like really enjoyable to watch because of like how accurate it was on one of the most meme-worthy things that we saw all summer long. Raygun out here. And I don't know if this was just like internet trolls or if it's true, being investigated on making the Olympics with like all
I
of
don't
the.
think that's I don't think that's happening. I think she
Okay, all right.
was like complained that people are like doing that and bullying her and all of this. But
Okay,
it really
'cause
was one of the highlights of the
I wouldn't be
Olympics.
shocked if there was an investigation. That was one of the craziest things I've ever seen, by the way.
It was, but like, let's get Smokey into the next breakdancing competition that we have. I mean, like this guy, whoever is in this mascot suit, was pretty good. Pretty good. I feel like we could do like the degree of difficulty could go up and he could do it. But that was so good.
It was
I love
amazing.
mascots. I love crazy things that happen. That happened during Tennessee's season opener. Shout out to Raygun, Smokey, or Smokey Raygun, however we want to refer to him. He is my MVP of the weekend.
That was pretty good.
We're going to wrap the show there because it's a high note, and Joshua can go look up Raygun's legal battles and spend the rest of the day working on that. But we had a blast. We appreciate you guys coming to spend some time with us each week. And Rushing the Field will be back. Joshua Perry, Nicole Auerbach next Thursday. We'll talk to you then.